Welcome, one and all, to Pacific414 Pop Talk. I am your host, Mike, along with my co-host, the Smoking Patriot, also known as Common Sense America. And tonight, we're going with part 2 of our Back to the Future Trilogy discussion. And this time, we will be talking about Back to the Future Part 2. So, let me ask you this, Patriot. When you think
Yes.
about Back to the Future Part 2, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Um, there's that's a hard one. I'd have to say seeing the DeLorean fly, because that was the first time we actually saw a flying car that didn't look ridiculous on screen. Because you'd see other movies and you could tell it was green screened or something like that. But there are certain shots where you see the DeLorean actually flying, and you're just like, damn, that looks good. So I'd say that's the first thing that comes to my mind.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you the first thing that comes to my mind is the fact that we get to see the DeLorean flying. We get to see it in action up in the sky, but also let me get to the scene real quick. Just have to pull it up. All right. I want us to take note. And let's change this here. Come on, cooperate with me. But anyways, let's take a look here. We've got a new Jennifer.
Yep.
New Jennifer, played by Elizabeth Shue. She replaces Claudia Wells, who played Jennifer in part 1.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never really heard, an official reason why. I've heard Claudia Wells state why she didn't come back for the sequel, and it's because of the health of her mother. So she spent time with her mother, and that's why we ended up getting a new Jennifer in part 2. But, if you want to put it in the realm of Back to the Future, it was just part of the alteration to the timeline. Marty must have done something else in 1955 that caused a change to Jennifer.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, and that's something about Back to the Future that I mean, again, Back to the Future is not a movie where you're meant to just have deep theological and soul
Mm.
searching and scientific discussions about. But if you had to, you could say that it's the whole, well, if you squash a butterfly or you kill this ant, then it will have a ripple effect. I mean, you could say that this new Jennifer is because Marty's dad, when he shoved the one guy, was, yeah. I mean, there's a whole list of things you could come up with.
Yeah.
So
Not that we're going to do it in tonight's broadcast, because tonight we're
no,
just going to be glowing about, part 2 of the trilogy. If we get into part 3, we get into part 3. But, that was one of the first things you notice watching part 2, going, wait a minute, I just watched part 1 on VHS, and now I'm watching this in the theaters, which this movie released on November 20th back in 1989, and there's a completely different Jennifer.
mm-hmm.
So it's like, what?
Yeah.
And another thing about, part 2, you didn't know that there was actually going to be a part 2 until later on in the VHS release, when the DeLorean leaves the McFly household and, you know, goes up in the air and flies toward the camera. Before, it would just fly to the camera, to go to a black screen, then the credits would roll. Well, in the home video release, later home video releases, it would say to be continued.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
hello, Black Dragon. Yes.
Yeah, I don't get notifications always as well. Actually, what I do is the only way I actually get that I can reliably get notifications is if I know that there's a YouTuber streaming on a certain day and time, I will
Mhm.
actually go and click on set reminder. And I will get a notification and I will get an email notification the moment that stream goes live. So I've had to start doing that with certain YouTubers now because I don't by default get their hey, I just went live streaming. So
Yeah. Same here. I mean, there have been some even today that I wanted to catch, and some yesterday that I wanted to catch because I didn't get that notification. I completely missed out on them.
mm-hmm. Yeah, fun stuff.
Yep. And Black Dragon goes on to say, I'm not even getting the set reminder notice.
Oh, okay. Then that's a first. Normally me and others will typically at least get something when they do that. But okay, wow, YouTube must hate you. YouTube must hate you.
Yeah, yeah. You know, YouTube is being YouTube. That's all I'll say. YouTube is being YouTube, and you know, just when you think you can get this platform figured out, wrong. There's a curveball. There's always a curveball.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I can remember watching Back to the Future Part 2 at the Edwards Cinema in San Marcos, California, with my mom and my sister. My dad had to work, but my mom was off that day. So we went to the movies and we saw Part 2. And I really enjoyed Part 2. I enjoyed it so much.
Your mic, Mike. You're muted. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know why I did that. I didn't mute myself.
I was trying to say Mike, and then I realized, wait, he's probably just thinking I'm calling his name.
But anyways, thanks a lot, streaming aren't you piece of shit. Yes, that is a genuine reaction. But anyways, my memories of Back to the Future, going to the Edwards Cinema in San Marcos, California, and watching the movie when it came out. Not immediately when it came out. It was I think a few weeks later. It, it seemed like it was over Christmas break that we actually went and saw it. And I can remember when the Scholastic School program for the books was going strong. This is one of the books that was offered, and of course I scooped it up.
I mean, why not?
Hmm.
It's actually funny my history with Back to the Future Part Two.
Okay.
So this is when my parents I don't know if it was a free trial or whatever, but they got ended up getting like premium cable for a while or for a bit. So when like all the movies would come out, Back to the Future or certain other movies, they would record them on VHS.
Hmm.
Well, we had owned one and three, but we did not own two because apparently two was just didn't come on the TV as much. For some reason, it just didn't. So when I saw two, oh, I mean, it was like it was an experience for me. It wasn't until surprising. It wasn't until the whole what was it online streaming. The videos are like Netflix and whatnot. Until once they came out, I could watch two whenever I wanted. But up until then, because I didn't have the money because they didn't do the whole remastered where all they did was just kind of clean it up and make it into like 1080 Blu-ray. So
Hmm.
the DVDs were not the cheapest to find of two. So I'm like, oh. But yeah, two for me, two and me have a very special place in my heart because I didn't see that often, and when I did, oh, it was like you just saw a gorgeous gal for the first time. You're just like, hot damn.
Well, the first way I actually ended up having it in my collection was recording it off HBO when it was on there. Looking, having to look up in the TV guide and the local newspaper to see what times it would be on and what time I would be able to actually get a shot at the VCR to put my blank cassette tape in, VHS cassette tape, and then be right there when it started to press, you know, record and play. Before that,
Yeah.
I would have to go to the movie theater and rent the movie. And Black Dragon is saying my order of favorites would be 1, 3, then 2. Yeah, that's my listing for the movies.
Yep, same here. And it
It,
literally comes down to the sole reason of, like I said, I watched 1 and 3 all the time because my parents recorded them onto VHS. Two was something
mhm,
that two I love two for different reasons. I love 1, 2, and 3, each of them for different reasons.
mhm.
But two for me, I just didn't develop as much of a love for because I didn't watch it as often. So to me, it was a special treat, and that was it. It's hard to love something when it's only a very special treat, you know?
Here's what I
So,
didn't like about 2 when I saw it when it first came out. Now, granted, I'm 11 years old and I'm in the 5th grade at the time. So, you know, I'm watching it, and what I didn't like at the time was the alternate 1985. I didn't like that dystopian look because let me lay down a picture for you. I'm getting into Star Trek at 7 years old. Here it is now. I'm 11 years old watching Back to the Future Part 2. I'm used to that utopian future that I've seen in Star Trek, and to see this dystopian crap hole that Biff has created all because of what happened with the sports almanac. It's like, wow, I don't like this particular 1985. And Black Dragon goes on to say, two just got kind of silly, more tongue in cheek comedy. Yeah, I could see that.
yeah. I don't think it was meant to be overtly tongue in cheek comedy. I think the way that they went about filming two was so it's kind of like for the same reason that certain horror movies, they're in the quote unquote horror genre, but people don't watch them to get us scared. They watch them to laugh because it's just so overdone and grandiose and ridiculous and stupid. Two
Hmm.
kind of has that a little bit. I think that's why
That
some
does.
people knock it a little bit, is because it does kind of go overboard on the ridiculous side to it, somewhat. So,
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. That was a great concept of revisiting the first movie from a different point of view.
hmm
But, some of the things like when Marty's in the school gymnasium trying to avoid Biff's goons, and he gets on the walkie-talkie with Doc and says, "Doc, they're after me." And then Doc says, "Then get out of there. Not me. The other me, the one that's on stage playing Johnny Be Good." And then, I thought, "Oh, come on. You knew right away, even at 11 years old, I knew right away, they're not gonna screw around with that." And I want to say hello to Spock's Friday Nights.
hail
Welcome,
Spock.
brother. Good to see you. As always, Julon True. But, you know, Marty getting into the gymnasium during the Enchantment Under the Sea dance, trying to avoid Biff's goons, trying to avoid his other self. Doc, in the meantime, you know, when Marty's in the back of Biff's car, is coming into town looking for Marty, and he's got to avoid his other self.
Yeah,
Otherwise, the consequences could be disastrous.
yeah. I think that's where two, because and again, I think two that I think they really, it's kind of like the whole Babe Ruth. They pointed out to left field. I kind of feel
Hmm.
like that's what they did with two, which I'm not saying is a bad thing. I mean, sometimes it's not bad to shoot for the moon. If you don't make it
No.
to the moon, at least you gave it your damnedest to do it. Although I think what hurt them also is the fact that you also, in the latter part of filming for two, you started filming three. I think you should have focused solely on two. Once two was in post production, then you start on three. Because if you got two movies filming this isn't like Lord of the Rings where it was just one continuous filming, and then in the post production they
Mhm.
cut it at certain points. No, they filmed one. They filmed that entire movie from the very beginning to the very end, and then they just cut it in the editing room in terms of where we're going to have our three movies. That's if they wanted to do two and three, they should have either done it like that. You film two and three not at the same time. It's just one continuous thing, and you cut it in the editing, or you film all of two, then, while that's in post production and editing and all that, then you start on three, because you can't have, you have too much going on at one time.
Yeah.
I think that might have been a big part of it as well.
It definitely was because unfortunately 2 suffers from it.
Mm-hmm.
There are sequences that are taken out that should have been left in, and you can find these, scenes that were originally planned to be in the movie that were cut out in the extras watching the Blu-rays and DVDs.
Yeah.
But, because they decided, we're gonna take a gamble, we're gonna take a risk, and we're gonna actually do these 2 movies all at the same time, again, like you're saying, bless you, by the way, it really
Oh,
hurt.
yeah.
The 2 sequels. I don't think it hurt 3 as much as it hurt 2.
Mm-mm. Three was fine. I don't think three was
Yep.
affected by it at all. At least it didn't
No.
feel like it was affected by it. Two, it just felt like they did too much and made it too complicated. You know, can't bump
Yep.
into your past selves. Um, the alternate reality. You go back from 2015 to 85, but because old Biff brought the almanac back to 55, it gets very confusing, and I think that they tried to do too much, kind of like what they did with Spider-Man 3. You
Mhm.
know, you have Venom, Sandman, and Goblin. You have all three of those. Then you have the Mary Jane thing. So you have all these things going together in the same movie, and it just feels so chaotic and not organized.
Mhm.
You could have honestly made two into two movies, to be honest, because there's a lot there. There's so much meat in two. You can't fit it into one movie successfully.
No. No, and, there don't get me wrong. I love the fact that you see flying cars in this movie. I love the fact that you see hoverboards in this movie. Because, being an 11-year-old back in 1989, seeing that on screen going, "Oh, are those real? Please let those be real." And then finding out that it was just a bit of movie magic. And Spock says, "I love 2 the most, though, because of the future aesthetic. Very well thought and crafted, especially in the late '80s." Very true. Trying to think, what would life be like, some 25 years from now, some 24, 30 years from now? Would we have flying cars? Would we be more environmentally friendly? Things of that nature, the Nikes. Let me try to get to that scene real quick. But who didn't want a pair of the power laced Nikes when they saw that in Back to the Future Part 2? I know I did. And then you see them released in 2011 and you're going, okay, so much for one of those. Come on. Trying to get it to that particular scene. All right. got a little ahead of myself there, so almost there. But anyways, because this leads up to it, you know, Marty, Doc, and Jennifer get to the future in part two. Of course, Doc has to use a sleep algorithm generator in order to put Jennifer to sleep because she's asking far too many questions and nobody should know too much about their own destiny. And that's one thing that's hammered over and over again in this particular movie is how no one should know too much about their own destiny. So you see here where Doc has basically a futuristic carrying case, and in this carrying case, there's jackets and shoes. I'm gonna let it play a little bit, then I'll bring it back on screen. Still there, Patriot? He might have it to step away for a little bit, but here you see Marty. Well, Marty McFly Jr. And one of the goals in part two was the fact that Doc had to, you know, knock Marty McFly Jr. so that Marty can meet up with Griff and prevent a robbery happening at the Clock Tower Mall.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, brother.
I've been talking for the past like almost 10 minutes, I swear.
Well, just like it muted my mic and I didn't realize it was muted.
And that's the funny thing is that on my end, my mic was not muted.
No, it wasn't. I was looking at it here. It wasn't muted, brother.
Yeah,
Just like
that's what
mine wasn't muted.
I don't know what was going on. So, um, um,
Go
yeah,
ahead and say what you wanted to say.
I said so much. I'm thinking, listen, if you're gonna have me on as a guest, don't ignore me, damn it.
I wasn't ignoring you. See, the
I
timeline
know.
skewed into an alternate stream. All alternate to, you know, everybody who stopped watching the stream except for you, me, Black Dragon, Spock. But
Oh,
reality for
Lord have
everyone else.
mercy. Yeah, I think with this, I think when they talk about the whole you should know your own future, you remember
Hmm.
that. You remember when they find that like probe, that I don't say probe, the spacecraft from the future in Enterprise, right?
Hmm.
And remember when they've and what was it? Trip is talking with Reed, and Reed, Reed saying, "Oh man, I'd love to know, all about my future, who I marry, and all that." And then Trip says to him, "All right, let's say this. Let's say you read all this stuff, okay? And then as you're going through and you meet the woman, okay, and you fall in love and you live happily ever after." He's like, and then
Hmm.
Reed's like, "Yeah, sounds amazing." He's like, "Now let me ask you this: Did you fall in love with her because of love or because some book told you?" And I
It would
kind of
be
feel like
because
it's
some book told him.
right, exactly. So it's like, is it genuine? And Reed was like, "Well, what does it matter if we're happy and we're in love? Does it matter if I knew who I was going to marry in advance? If those feelings are still the same? If I fell in love with her for a reason and we live happily ever after until our dying breath, does it matter if I knew that information in advance?" Yeah, it's very thought provoking stuff. I mean, sci-fi can be very thought provoking, and people never want to admit that.
No, they just think it's all about lightsabers, phasers, and TARDISes and starships. It's not. It's really thought provoking stuff. Real good sci-fi has always been thought provoking.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, even in this movie, Doc tells Marty about his kids and the reason why. Marty has to replace his son and the meet up with Griff and his gang is because, according to the future of that Hill Valley, that timeline, Martin McFly Jr. takes part in a robbery. He gets sentenced to jail. Then Marty's daughter tries to break Marty's son out, and she gets sentenced for 20 years. And why? Because the justice system works more swiftly in the future now that they have abolished all lawyers. I'm just quoting what Doc says.
No, I know. I've always just found it funny because I remember watching that, and we used to have a family friend who is a lawyer, and
Mm-hmm.
we're watching it, and then that line is said, and he's like, "Well, son of a bitch, I hate the future. If this is what it's going to end up being, I'm out of a job."
Hmm.
I, I was laughing my ass off when he said that.
And I'm gonna pause it here because I actually got it to the right scene for once. But look, Nike Power Lace shoes. And watch what they do. Gosh, wouldn't that be too convenient? I mean, I know it's something that, nowadays it would probably fit with the way our culture is, but you know,
Yeah. Although you know what you should do? You
hmm,
should, if you can, find the actual video of um,
the Nike Power Lace shoes.
the actual ones that came out. Was it 2015, 16?
All right, give me a second and I'll
Because they
look them up.
yeah, so for those watching this, they actually did come out with those shoes. Unfortunately, um it was, I don't want to say it was necessarily a gimmick per se, but what happened is that it was like a special charity to like Parkinson's or something like that. Okay.
Yeah,
And
I think it
yeah, it was like
was
you had to donate what,
Michael J. The Michael J. Fox Foundation.
that was it. And you had to donate what was it, like $50,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then so, but they actually came out with these, but again, it was for the first X amount of people. I think it was like several hundred, maybe, of people who donated $50,000, and you got these shoes, and they came in a very special case. Honestly, the case looked like something out of Star Trek, The Next Generation, to be honest with you. Um, but yeah. So they actually did. They actually did make these shoes. The problem is that is that they weren't made for the mass public, which I have much beef with because it's like, you know, if we have all this technology and we have all this capability, why can't we attempt to make something here? You know,
Hmm.
or at least attempt to.
I mean, there are several videos, so I'm trying to find one of the actual shoes, not just something that someone's put a mock-up of. In the meantime, I'm gonna look at the chat. Everybody's saying hello. Good to see you all here.
Yeah.
Let's see. I don't necessarily want to use someone else's video. That's why I'm trying to use my own copy of Back to the Future Part 2 for doing this.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense to me.
But I'm not seeing any one in particular, so I'm just going to go ahead and click on a link and I'll post it in the chat this way that the chat can watch, and I'll put it in the private chat so you can watch this one too. And go. It's now posted in the public chat and the private chat. Yes, it is. It's definitely a great film. You know, the whole trilogy is great. It's why we're talking about it tonight too. You know, I mean, heck, it doesn't matter how many times I've seen these movies, I never get tired of them. And, I'm gonna let it play a little bit back on the movie side because, I always found this next scene funny after Marty puts on the shoes. All right, so it's almost there. I'm gonna go ahead and pause it here. I'm gonna go ahead and share it to the screen, and I'm gonna let it play. Again, not playing any audio, but I always found it funny. Here we've got Marty putting on the jacket, and Doc's running back, and Marty saying it doesn't fit. All Doc has to do is hit a button and size adjusting. How many times would you like that? One size truly does fit all as long as you hit a little red button. And are you still with me, Patriot? Private chat real quick. Ground control to Asia, Tom. Yeah, the stream looks like it's having issues tonight, so I'll try not to go too long on this like we did the other night. So, anyways, let me go ahead and remove this. Now, when it came to, Marty and Doc being in the future, what was one of your favorite scenes, from the 2015 part of the movie? Can you hear me, Patriot? That is a no.
All right. I don't know why, but I got a black screen of you on my end. Dang it, StreamYards again.
All right. We're going to give this one more attempt. Yeah, because I'm checking the stream. I'm not noticing any issues on the YouTube
Well,
end of the stream. And
yeah, I think because I tried opening up the link and it's like when I it must have done something with the StreamYards when I tried opening up that link.
I know the other day when I was doing Pop Talk for part one, I noticed that they made a few changes on the StreamYards, and so it's one of those things. So, I mean, I could bring up the other backup that I've done if folks don't mind waiting just a few minutes.
I mean, I don't know if it's necessarily on your end. I mean, because for me it was when I tried opening up the link. And remember, I'm on my iPad, so it has to actually swap over to the YouTube app. So maybe it might have been on my end too. I don't know. I can't hear you. Are you muted again?
It muted me again. It said the browser lost connection. That's it. Okay, folks, give us a few minutes. We'll be back.